are the Manchester
Poverty
Truth
Commission.
Nothing
About us.
without us.
is for us.
Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Angelique and I am one of the Grassroots Commissioner. We are so pleased that you have been able to join us today. We are going to be spending the next hour or so together, sharing about the work of the Poverty Truth Commission and how the Commission has changed each one of us. We hope what we share will impact every one of you here today and ultimately the life of those living in poverty in Manchester. Please, can we ask you to view Zoom using the speaker view setting? This means you will be able to see clearly the person speaking. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Gemma. I am also one of the Grassroots Commissioners. Last time we all gathered together was our launch event back in June 2019. A lot has happened since then. At the event, we shared stories about our day-to-day realities of struggling in poverty. It has not been an easy year for any of us. Sadly, some of our commissioners have had to leave the progress due to their own circumstances because of becoming even harder as a result of COVID. Conversations about the reality of poverty in Manchester are more important than ever, and we would ask you all today to listen in with your whole selves. Each one of us has a part to play, and that must begin with deeply listening.
We are also here to celebrate. Despite a national pandemic, the Poverty Truth Commission has continued to meet. Relationships continue to grow, and as a result, the commissioners have worked together to make some clear recommendations to our city, as well as already developing some excellent work that will impact many lives for the better in Manchester. My name is Lizzie and I have been part of the facilitation team. It has been such a privilege to work alongside some really brilliant people from across our city. I wish I could introduce you to every single one of them today, but I hope this event will give you a tiny taste of what can happen when we bring together people from all walks of life to get to know each other and work together on solutions to the challenges our city faces. Back in September 2019, 15 people with lived experience of poverty gathered together on a monthly basis with 15 of the city's leaders and key influencers. For a long time, there was no agenda except to get to know each other. We have heard each other's stories, we've laughed and we've cried. Together, we've explored what poverty looks like in our city. At times, the process has been extremely uncomfortable, but we think uncomfortable is so important if we're going to authentically uncover some of the inequalities that exist and do something about it. During this event, we're going to talk about some of the outcomes of the Poverty Truth Commission, but it has been the process of listening and taking longer to sit with the impact of poverty without jumping to solutions that has really had the biggest impact of all. We're all so busy trying to do our best to make Manchester a great place to live for everyone. But the Poverty Truth Commission reminds us that every person, everyone has a different story and so much to bring. And by slowing down, by putting people first, by really listening and working together, there is so much more we can achieve.
Is that
wanted to be part of the Commission because I wanted to get to know the city better and its communities and its people, and also to help people in the city to improve people's lives and to address poverty.
I wanted to be part of it to try and eradicate homelessness and poverty in Manchester.
But also to sort of like, you know, meet with a range of different people to talk about the issues and the way they impacted on my community.
So I've been a GP with Insure in South Manchester for 20 years and have observed through listening to my patients and watching what happens to them in their daily lives, the real impact and harm that poverty can cause. And it was just so obvious to me that if this was something that could make a difference, then I should be part of it.
It was a chance to let the authorities know how the sufferers are feeling and what can help them. So I became a part of this commission and I played my role.
Well, when we first met up in the commission, it was nerve-wracking, I think, for everybody there. But we soon got to know each other and all became open and friendly, and now they're best friends.
We shared our stories and we stopped making assumptions about each other very quickly, I think, because the civic commissioners often had their own experiences of poverty, their own experiences of inequality.
The things that helped me to get connected with the other commissioners and civic leaders, it was the sufferance of other commissioners. Before that, I felt that I'm the alone who is suffering here. But it was a kind of big sport to feel and meet the people who are suffering in different ways. So I was not alone.
I've learnt just to be myself and to speak my mind now, which I was a bit shy at first. People don't think I am, but I actually am. I was surprised about how much help they actually gave you when they listened to what you were actually saying and the fights you were having with the people in the hierarchy as such.
What I learned and what surprised me the most was that commonality between the two sides, like the shared backgrounds, the shared experiences. This process meant that we were able to find out that there are real people in the council and in the police and in the NHS who genuinely do care and want to make a difference.
I'm a doer. I'm someone that tries to help people, and I think that what I really took away was, you know, many people don't want your help. They want your support. They want your assistance. They want your encouragement. They want your empowerment. They don't want you to do it for them.
Probably the biggest outcome and the most enjoyable part is the relationships that are created, because it's those relationships that allow change to happen and for change to be sustained. And that's probably the most transformational part of the Poverty Truth Commission. That's what makes the real difference and marks it out from so many other projects.
So I think it's left me with a really powerful reminder of the radical injustices that exist in this country, and my organisation, LGBT Foundation, needs to really step up to the plate and think about how we can best support people who find themselves in that situation.
I would like to see the end of poverty in Manchester and the end of homelessness in Manchester. I believe everybody should have the right to have a roof over their head and enough money to live on.
Well, my hope is that the ideas that we came up with can actually be put into practice, and that if those then work, they can be implemented not just in Manchester but going into Greater Manchester and then across the Northwest and even nationally.
I think we have a huge responsibility to make a difference as a result of it. So my real hope is that this is the beginning and not the end, and that we can look back in another 2 or 3 years' time and say we here in Manchester are doing this differently because we had a Poverty Truth Commission.
But I'm also aware that some of the commissioners have made really strong connections with each other. Some of the civic commissioners are taking away really tangible change projects that they can sort of like implement within their own organisations. So I think the Truth Commission will sort of like live on, and I think it will live on within the commissioners and also with the resources that are generated from our time together.
I would say nothing about us, without us, is for us. We need to be involved, and a sufferer can help other sufferers better.
This whole process has been led by building relationships and having conversations, and that's something we want to continue today during this event, but also going forward into the future. So we'd ask, if you are tweeting and posting on social media, if you can use the hashtag PovertyTruthMCR, then we'll be able to find your post and reshare them, but also people who can't attend the event today will also be able to catch up on what's been said and be part of this conversation too. We'll be coming back before the end of the morning to share a few of your tweets and posts that have been shared, but for now I'll hand you over to Councillor Bev Cray for an introduction.
Thanks, Sinead, and it's so great to see so many people join us today on Zoom, a very different way of doing things, but I think we're certainly making the best of the COVID situations at the minute with our celebration today. So my name's Councillor Bev Craig. I'm the Deputy Leader of Manchester City Council, and I came to this process midway through, and I think it's probably fair at this point to pay tribute to my colleague that came before me, Councillor Sue Murphy, an instrumental voice in championing anti-poverty in our city. So I just really want to say a few words today, and I think at the very heart of it, thinking about what could be added to this celebration today is really about Manchester and how, from the council's perspective, making Manchester a fairer city really is in our DNA. Within the city, it's been long-standing, but we need renewed and reinvigorated efforts to show Manchester people that every pound we spend is about investing in the people of our city, and every decision we make is around building a fairer city. And as an employer, we've been setting an example for some time with the likes of the Real Living Wage or the services that we provide in our city, spending over £40 million every year, alleviating, tackling and preventing poverty. And obviously using our spend locally to create jobs and invest in our communities. But the challenge we face in our city remains huge, and evidence shows that over the last 10 years, cuts and austerity have made poverty worse. The improvements that we were making in the city have been stalled by government policy changes and cuts over the last decade. And also we've seen the challenge of COVID, which really has laid bare the pre-existing inequalities that were in our society, exacerbating them and making them much worse. The plan for the city, led by the council but in conjunction with our partner organisations, is called Our Manchester. And it's fitting really because the Our Manchester plan puts people right at its heart. And that's why the Poverty Truth Commission is so important in my view, because behind every statistic, every number is a real person, a real life lived, a person with their own potential to achieve their own dreams and go on to do amazing and brilliant things and things that make them have a happy life. And real change, in my view, happens when it's real people's energy that are harnessed, when voices are shared and voices are lifted. And that's why the outcomes of this commission will feature not just in the council's refreshed anti-poverty plan for the city that you'll hear more about in the autumn, but that there's a real role for all of us to play, everyone in this call, that builds a movement around what's acceptable and what's not in our society, what we want our children and our families to experience in the future moving forward. Because when we talk about building back better or recovering from COVID, we have to accept what existed before for many, many of our communities across the country simply wasn't good enough. So today is a celebration. It's a celebration of voices coming together. It's also, in my view, a celebration of people's spirits, their passions and their energies. And it's really great to be involved. And I hope you get to take away today as much as I've got to take away from the process. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Councillor Bev. It was February 2020 when we last had our full commission meeting together in person. After that, we went to that great invention we all love and hate, Zoom. In the last meeting, though, after months of getting to know each other and exploring the huge complexities of poverty, together we'd come up with a long list of themes like housing, mental health, debt, addiction, chronic illness, migration. The list went on and on. The group eventually decided on 3 particular areas where they would focus their thinking and begin to imagine solutions that could have a huge beneficial impact on life for those struggling. We formed 3 task groups: family poverty, exploitation, and benefits and council tax. We're going to hear from each task group this morning, and we're going to start with Gemma from the family poverty task group. Over to you, Gemma.
Family Poverty Task Group. In the Family Poverty Task Group, we discuss the day-to-day challenges and exclusive that children and family in poverty face. We came up with these key statements. Low-cost school uniform should be accessible to all. Essential clothing items, winter coats and shoes should be accessible to all. The culture offered in the city should be accessible and affordable to all. Information on services in the city should be more easily accessible to all. Broadband should be regulated as a utility and available to all regardless of ability to pay. As a direct impact of the work in our task groups, the Home Theatre have made their £1 tickets available to all care leavers. The Home Theatre Group are looking to invite people with lived experience of poverty to join their board of trustees to ensure that poverty remains a priority in their agenda. The Home Theatre Group are working with the Parks Department of the Council to plan culture events in local parks and communities so the deprived communities have the opportunity to access culture, experiences and activities. One Manchester are extending their working wardrobe project to add a junior working wardrobe where children and young people referred can access school shoes, trainers and coats. A pop-up uniform shop will be piloted in Wythenshawe and Openshaw where people can donate uniforms in new or good condition that has been grown out of so that others can benefit. Understanding everyday experience is impact of the digital exclusion has been raised in the city digital exclusion strategy.
What the Poverty Truth Commission seems to do is bring humanity back into the room, like a safe space to actually be human. And the impact for me is, I think I've said that, is the confidence that I actually do belong in these environments. My voice is valid because I've always had that issue that, of where I've come from and my experiences, and, it's the imposter syndrome. And my contribution is just as valuable as somebody who's got, who's a doctor. This is my seat at the table.
The story begins with this COVID, where things changed. I can't remain in this kind of situation. I have to find a way out. And the member of the group were very understanding. Even they encouraged me. They say, you are not alone in this. Yeah, I was really happy to hear that.
It's really good to have that opportunity to contribute to something where you don't usually have that, like you don't just as an individual person have the opportunity to talk to all these people high up in organisations. What I usually come back to is the similarities of life experiences between grassroots commissioners and business and civic leaders. So it wasn't a case of here's all the people who are broadly working class, second generation immigrant, just grown up poor, and that's how they have stayed, versus this group of people who grew up middle class and have always been in middle class professions. You could have pairs of people where a grassroots commissioner and a business or civic leader had the same start for the first 20 years to adulthood or more, and then something happened that sent one of them down the path to poverty. Being able to talk about people's life experiences meant it broke down that feeling of us and them. People could suffer bereavement or chronic illness or a relationship breakdown, whatever their financial position. So that also helps to bring that, we're all people together, because whilst poverty makes everything harder, that shared experience of grief and loss and struggle and frustration was something that could bring us all together. So the people who had the positions of more power could then use their own experiences to feed into the importance of listening to the people who were in poverty. You always know more when you know the actual people rather than just the data.
It was a feeling like I'm not alone. There are more like me. I am from a very closely knitted family. After a few meetings with the other commissioners, it was like a family, and it was always good to be with them, discuss with them and sit with them. Yeah. When we admit, it means we understand, we know that we are wrong, and this admission is the first step to correct it.
My name's Nadine, and I'm one of the grassroots commissioners and also the co-chair alongside Superintendent Dave Pester of Greater Manchester Police of the Task Force Exploitation Group. In the Exploitation Task Group, we acknowledged that exploitation is a huge subject, and we specifically discussed the impact of poverty in the following areas: gangs and grooming for criminal exploitation, childhood trauma and trauma-informed responses, sexual exploitation, including survival sex work, and work exploitation. Together, we agreed on these statements. As a commission, we state that everyone is deserving of love, and that love is an important factor in us being safe. As a commission, we state that everyone should have what they need to be safe. As a commission, we state that some of the systems that should be there to protect people from exploitation and abuse may actually make people more vulnerable. For example, the police, the criminal justice system, the Home Office, and social services. This is due to the known and feared negative consequences that could happen to the exploited person or their abuser. We believe that many systems leave some people at more risk of exploitation. The intersectional areas of identity and experience impacted include the LGBTQ+ community, Black people and those who are from ethnic diverse communities, women, sex workers, those with disabilities, learning disabilities, autism and ADHD, for example, and people who have uncertain immigration status or who have no recourse to public funds. We can amplify each other's work and bring more attention to anything that is working. Be an ally. There is great power in this. As a direct result of the commission, the Social Work Manchester University and Manchester Medical School have designed a standalone session on exploitation and poverty. This covers adverse childhood experiences, known as ACEs, and trauma within the framework of poverty. Both institutions currently cover most of the topic in the context of other subjects, but it was believed a standalone session to be delivered as part of the curriculum will help to embed this knowledge and practice on all students being educated in health and social care. The first session has been delivered with many more planned for the future. The Commissioner, who works at Manchester University, will lobby the other universities to do the same. Manchester Health and Care Commissioning restates its commitment to commissioning for inclusion. Manchester Health and Care Commissioning will advocate for lived experience to be part of planning and commissioning in whichever body supersedes it with the next restructure of the NHS. Poverty is now on the agenda for the LGBT Foundation's 2-year strategy. And finally, a new trauma response community hub is being established and set up in North Manchester. Cheetham Hill Advice Centre will work in the setting up of this hub to include responses to poverty and its impact. Thank you for listening.
And say that I felt completely powerless at the beginning of the process. I'm used to receiving information about problems and kind of like creating solutions. So I found it really, really hard not to kind of like jump in with advice and suggestions and could we do this and could we do that. I also felt very, very humble, listening to people's lived experience, listening to their stories, listening to their realities, and how kind of like different it was from my own.
It's probably would be one of the most humbling and privileged things I've done in the last couple of years, without a shadow of a doubt.
I think you very soon learn that despite what you've come across in your professional life, the reality of hearing people's stories of the daily grind of poverty and how it impacts on them, it was very enlightening, I think, for me.
Trying to respond to people as human beings rather than cases, because that's sometimes what happens when you're in those kind of support organisations, that you can stop seeing the person and see the problem first. So there was a little bit of how's this going to work in a very different way than a meeting normally would, because we all go to lots of meetings, but this wasn't a meeting. This was a gathering and a conversation. Trying to psych myself up to be willing to have my assumptions really, really heavily challenged. So there was a sort of, talking to myself to be brave in that and admit when I didn't necessarily know stuff that perhaps I thought I should have done.
Yes, I learned a lot, and it was great hearing from people with lived experience.
I think it's had quite a profound effect on me in many ways. Just the hearing firsthand from the people with lived experience has been at times very moving and also very powerful. It's been galvanizing in terms of the sort of things that I do in my day-to-day life and the sort of things that I can influence. It's a sort of life affirming, really. Yeah, I think it's been life affirming.
Sometimes, you didn't know what was coming. You were just coming and, listening and hearing. And yes, I will recommend that process.
This approach takes longer, is more complicated, needs more resource, but ultimately develops sort of like much more powerful solutions.
The bit that I think I will take forward more is the idea of bringing your whole self into the room. So, not just relying and encouraging people to not just use their professional selves if they're there for, a work role that they have, but actually bring your own lived experience in.
Absolutely want to continue to use this way of working in the work environment. And yes, we have done it to a limited extent previously, but I think the range of people from a lived experience commissioner group that were in this was far wider than anything we'd achieve on our own. But when you hear the variety of experiences that we heard and had the opportunity to engage with, I mean, that's just mind-blowingly wonderful gold, isn't it, to have that range.
And that time I spent with Cyril and the other grassroots commissioners has reinforced the need for us to think about poverty and for backgrounds, and to make sure that, you know, in our thinking and in the way that we recruit, that we don't miss those opportunities to have that kind of breadth of thought and lived experience in terms of us and how we police the decisions that we make, and that's at all levels of the organisation.
I'm not driving, look. I'm stationary.
I know you're not, so I just can't help myself.
There's my wheel, there's my wheel. No, I did contemplate trying to style it out and pretending that my camera was broken so you didn't see that I was in the car, but I thought you'd rather see me big coat and all. I think for me, some of the real lessons is how people with lived experience are involved in not just decision making, but the very early stages. But I suppose the thing that sticks with me is that if in the city, over 40% of kids are growing up in poverty, this isn't an EDI strategy, this is nearly a majority of our citizens. So there's something for me that has to shift around the way that we think about it as a city. So it's not just seen as dealing with another disadvantaged group, but in many areas of the city, it's dealing with the majority of our citizens. And I just think there's something for me coming out of the Poverty Truth Commission about how that's embedded into everyone's way of thinking, not just as an extra consultation group that we can go to.
Again, going back to use of this process, the reason I got into housing in the first place was because there's some voluntary work I did at university in Drumchapel in Glasgow, where a whole lot of people had been shifted from the Gorbals, slum clearance. We'll give them a better life. We'll give them inside toilets and central heating, and their lives were blighted by being put on this enormous estate with no facilities and no transport. And yet, how many times on a smaller scale do we, in local authorities, in housing organisations, make well-intentioned decisions which, as we talked about, we think are solving problems for people, but actually we haven't heard their side of things and really engaged with it, and that the things that will make a difference to them are not necessarily the things that we think.
I suppose the personal impact, yes, hearing some of the stories, that was quite moving, but also really, encouraged by the bravery, of people to share some of this, because like, Paul, Bev and others have mentioned, we all have our stories, but usually don't bring it into the fore and don't talk about it, so I felt really encouraged by the bravery of people wanting to engage with, civic business leaders and talking about that.
Also watching our grassroots commissioners grow and seeing what it gave them. And for me, it was worth it, even if we've touched the lives of those few people, because that will send impact and ripples out, won't it? I think the responsibility now is that we hear their authentic voices and we do something about what they've been brave enough to share with us. Health inequalities in Manchester are not new. So the commitment for me would be that we, as the kind of anchor institutions, don't just continue to be part of the problem. We have to be part of the solution. For me, it's the hope of next steps. And as I said at the beginning, thinking about how we structure the NHS to better hear the voices of real people in our city, but also that we don't always just have people from privilege with middle class backgrounds sat in rooms making decisions about people who are living in poverty. So I'm really keen that, for me, the legacy of this is that we change our board structures to include socio-economic diversity. But we don't often actually look around the table and say, well, what's your income bracket? Are any of you on benefits? Do you have no food in your fridge? And here we are making decisions about people's lives without feeling the cold and the hunger and the desperation that comes with the fragility that poverty brings to people's lives.
Some of the people that have, some of the people with lived experience have been through the toughest times, have their resilience has been nothing but admirable. It makes you think about the sort of narrative that's out there about poverty and people who are living in poverty. You sort of know going into it, nobody wants to live in poverty, but actually the people who are desperately trying to get the hell out of it and just meet unreasonable barriers all the way through. As I go through my day-to-day work, both as somebody who leads an institution and also has got a civic responsibility to think about the impact that what the decisions that I make have on people's life chances and on their lives, particularly with respect to poverty.
Regardless of whether you've got a vulnerability, whatever it may be, in my industry, it can be really daunting walking into a bank and talking about your finances. And I just think that's been my kind of little glory, if you like, around understanding more about what people are going through on a day-to-day basis and just talking about how important it is to find out about your customers and people who are walking through the doors, because everybody's got a story to tell and they're all different.
And I think what was really lovely was that we stayed in the making relationships phase. And I think some people got a bit like, well, what are we doing here? This is, what's it about? Yeah. We're chatting to each other about what our values are, what happened in our early lives, all of this. But I think that was really, really important. Because what I saw as well, and what I clearly saw when I'd gone out and come back in, even more starkly, was at the beginning there was that sort of divide, really, wasn't there, between grassroots commissioners and civic leader, which wasn't there, people in the same group, but you sort of felt that divide in the room. And then over time that got less and less and less. And I think that was because we'd spent so long getting to know each other, trusting each other, and we became people together in the room. Because over the years, obviously, I've been involved in lots of groups with like service user care involvement, public boards about this and that. But because that time doesn't go in, that divide, even if it's not a sort of hostile, I'm not suggesting it is a hostile divide, but there is that divide there. And I think this is the one group that I've really felt people felt we were all equally participating in by the end of it, which was, it was a lovely experience. And I think that's something I'm taking away of relationship-based practice. Yes.
So, hi, I'm Steph. I was part of the final task group that looked at council tax and benefits. And we discussed some of the impact that debt and arrears has in keeping people in poverty, even after they've turned other parts of their life around. And people often do all they can to get out of debt, but it can prove to be a kind of an impossible mountain to climb. It's not just a financial burden, but it also has quite a negative impact on health and well-being. So we worked together on ideas for reducing council tax arrears and possibly other kinds of debt for people in hardship. And as a direct result of the commission, there is now a pilot project between Manchester City Council and the Oasis Centre in Gorton. So council staff and the management team at Oasis have agreed an approach that will give the Oasis staff direct access to the council tax back office. So on a weekly basis, they'll be able to discuss whatever casework has come to Oasis and has been brought to their attention, and they'll be able to talk about that with the council to try to resolve issues faced by the people coming to Oasis. So the council will be able to do things like checking that the council tax liabilities are correct, that the appropriate discounts and exemptions are in place. And the council is also going to have wider powers to do things like waiving summons costs, giving discretionary payments, allowing longer term arrangements, and also raising issues relating to council tax support with benefit colleagues. So in short, everything possible will be done to help people to meet their council tax responsibilities in a sustainable manner that will help them to come out of debt.
So I'm Viv, one of the other civic commissioners. I'm going to talk to you about some of the insights we've pulled together, things that really matter to us. So as a commission, we discussed the impact of poverty. And the more we spoke, the more we realised how many of us had experienced exploitation. This included childhood sexual abuse, sexual exploitation, survival sex work, and criminal exploitation. And as we talked, we realised that the things we didn't have made us more at risk of abuse. Because we didn't have the practical things we needed, we were more at risk of those who wanted to exploit us. We knew that poverty creates the conditions that places people at risk. This wasn't about us. This was about the system we were trying to survive. We're going to share with you some of our experiences of exploitation and then share what we'd like you to do. We're bringing lots of different experiences, but we're going to speak with one voice. This is about us, but it could be about anyone. And it doesn't have to be like this. Sexual exploitation causes physical harm, emotional distress, and long-term trauma. But imagine if the right help had been available to me when I needed it most. We now know that when children face traumatic events, this can cause lifelong harm. These are called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. We know that future harm is preventable if the right help is offered early. So through one voice, here are some of our experiences. I worked in the sex industry, and this causes me trauma all the time. I was sexually abused as a child. This was made easier because the person gave me things I wanted but couldn't afford. In response to the abuse I faced, I started to get into trouble at school. This led me to getting in trouble with the police and eventually ending up in prison. As an underage teenager, I had sex with older men, as this was a way for me to feel valued and to have a sense of worth that I wasn't getting from anywhere else. Working in the sex industry causes trauma on top of trauma all the time. We all need to understand this. I face the consequences of the trauma I experienced every day of my life. Something happened 12 years ago and I had a breakdown. I've been stuck in that cycle for over 10 years. If support had been available, I could have processed all of this sooner. Poverty is a significant reason why people end up in the sex industry. Poverty creates an avoidable risk that some people choose to exploit. The ways some of our systems work creates this risk. If our systems worked better, people wouldn't be in that situation. We found that some people are left particularly vulnerable to being exploited within the sex industry. These include refugees and asylum seekers, people with no recourse to public funds, transgender people, and homeless people. I'm worried about the people who are in systems that leave people vulnerable. The immigration system does that. There's an increasing cost of visas, not enough free representation. People are often left with no recourse to public funds, either due to an asylum claim or as a condition of their entry to the UK. And this means that people cannot claim benefits and are also unable to work. And that means people have no access to public help, but are unable to work legally or safely. Even though we have a system dealing with modern slavery, our immigration system is creating the conditions to make this happen. Other people are also at risk, and often the systems that should provide protection fail to do so. The huge wave of poverty that's coming due to COVID will mean that more people will need to do survival sex work as a way to feed themselves and their children. Imagine the cycle people are in with universal credit, waiting 4 to 6 weeks with no money. Imagine a mother worrying how she's going to feed her kids, and so going and doing all that and all that could cause. The children who are more isolated now The families who have less make children more at risk of abuse and mean more people will consider sex work as a means to survive. I'm so worried about the people who will go into sex work and how we can keep these people safe. It will affect people from all areas of life. We need to be planning for this now. We need to recognise the impact of poverty and act now. We need to provide better solutions. We need to show people how valuable they are. When facing poverty, we need to provide safe spaces of love and connection that protect rather than exploit. We need to offer therapy for those who've faced any kind of trauma. We need training in trauma-informed responses for everyone. The Manchester Poverty Truth Commission asks that you use any power, influence or resources you have to combat exploitation and to reduce the factors that place people at risk. Anything you do to combat poverty reduces the chances of other children and adults having the experiences we had. It's just the right thing to do. We ask that if it's in your power, please help with trauma. Identify when adults have had trauma and adverse childhood experiences and provide meaningful therapies that will help. People need trauma-informed responses. It's so important to keep people safe. We ask that you do everything you can to get everyone trained in trauma-informed responses. Spot ACEs in children earlier and help them immediately. And please use any resources you have to prevent a cycle of abuse. This will mean that when people ask for help, they are helped in the right way, and fewer people will end up having the experiences we had. So it's taking a moment to take all that in, and with gratitude for all those who shared their personal stories. Here's a short video about the specific impact the Commission had on 2 of the commissioners who took part.
So I was apprehensive actually because, believe it or not, some people don't like the police, what the police represents.
There's nothing that I was worried about. Obviously I was intrigued, but I was a bit confused as to kind of what it was. You know, if you're used to going into those, typical kind of, organised meetings, you very quickly know who's who. Whereas within that environment, it was a bit like, oh, this is different. And it felt as though things weren't moving. It was like, we were just chatting and this. And I think that's probably because of the conditioning of, outcome focus driven, quickly, let's get things done. And, so over time, obviously, I understood and started to grasp that what it was.
It's how relevant is my viewpoint and experience to what the group collectively wants to achieve. But I think over time, I think that you do realise that you have got overall a positive contribution to make.
It's been a real stepping stone for me in the sense of it gave me a space to build my confidence, to find a voice within that setting, kind of coming from the community as well. And then being a professional, you wear different hats, don't you? So within that environment, it gave like a safe space to actually be human. So, because we're in roles a lot of the time. So when you go to a meeting, I'm representing this, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that. Whereas there was a bit more freedom, but there was a security in it as well, in the sense of this is what this aim is for. Because it's just those roles, I think, that you get used to playing. And what the Poverty Truth Commission seems to do is bring humanity back into the room.
I've been doing this job for 28 years, and you develop a sixth sense of when people kind of put up with you because you're supposed to be there but don't really want you there.
The civic and business leaders, they're human. And there's that divide of where they're responsible, aren't they, for making a decision, which sometimes ultimately impacts people positively or negatively.
I did worry about how sort of as a civic commissioner, I would sort of gel with the group, not just the grassroots commissioner at all, but everybody on the group at the time. And there are times when you think people just don't like what I'm saying, potentially because of who I work for.
When I shared my experience that time, and that was when I kind of connected with Dave Pester, when I'd shared about the police and my experience as a child and young person with the police, and he was like horrified, you know, and apologised, and I never expected that, but that was very instrumental for me, because I'd always seen the police as the enemy, is that you don't talk to the police, you don't, if you're seen talking to the police, or, you know, within the community that I come from, you know, that's a no-no.
It's always really powerful when you hear the impact of policing or people's contact with the police on how it's shaped not just that moment in time for them, but also their lives, whether it's a positive or a negative experience. And unfortunately, you know, it's quite often people remember the negative experiences, don't they? So I think that's been really powerful, because you think you know what that's like, but when you're with a group that you're working with and you hear it on a regular basis, you know, you can't help but forget that. So I would say that's probably the biggest impact.
Giving me that, you know, opportunity to actually, you know, see someone as human. You know, I've not seen Dave in his police, you know, action. You know, I don't know how he operates, but I've seen him as a person, you know. So that's been really powerful for me. Yeah, I was shocked when I see him in action. I'll be like, what? I don't know you.
Yeah.
I've had the privilege of seeing your comments as they've been coming through, and I'm able to share some of those. Lizzie, can you just give me a nod, because I've got a bit of a glitchy system. Can you hear me okay? Yes, brilliant. So I'm going to read through some of the tweets that have come through already. Lots of recognition for the importance of the process and kind of what's been brought to the system and to the conversation by the people who've been around the table. So there's a tweet from Karina Carter: so important to properly listen to people. Everyone has something to offer, and so pleased to see Manchester prioritising this work. Really enjoying the celebration. A comment from Imogen Gregoriak: slowing down and putting people first, a good early recommendation from the Commission. Emily Bradbury commented, brilliant to be hearing stories from the Poverty Truth Commission and what this has achieved, to be reminded that behind every statistic is a person. And Young Manchester tweeted, good insight and recommendations from the Family Poverty Task Group, and the Grassroots Commissioners bringing humanity back into the room. And some of the comments already, people thinking through and recognising the impact of the work they're already involved in, but thinking through to the future as well. So Adrian Ball from Manchester Settlement saying that Manchester Settlement delighted to be posting Openshaw pop-up uniform shop. So linking back to some of the recommendations from the Family Task Group. Street Support Network, we need all experiences to be heard, for everyone to know that they have the right to speak and to have a seat at the table. We can't create a world that works with all the power in the hands of the few. And finally, a post from Abigail Turley. This is the first time I've heard of the Poverty Truth Commission, but every story is bringing goosebumps. What a thing to be part of. Incredible work from everyone. Can't wait to see what is ahead. So I'll leave it there. Please continue to post throughout today. It's really helpful for people who aren't able to attend the meeting, but also for us to continue this conversation. We're talking about online because that's where we are at the moment, but please remember all of this is based upon kind of your personal relationships and influence with other people around you. So anything you've been impacted by today, please bring it back to your organisations, to your friends and family, and over to your communities as well, and talk about what you've heard today and what you think we can all do to be part of addressing poverty going forward. So I'm going to hand you over now to Ruth for some closing remarks.
Thank you so much. We talked about the fact we've laughed and we've cried, didn't we? And I've relived every emotion of the Commission, I think, in the last hour. I will pull myself together, I promise, but it's quite hard to go at the end of something like this when it's meant so much to us all. So I think the last hour has been a real celebration and a testament to the people that stepped forward and put themselves into this process. I think, as Steph said, we as the business commissioners are not so different as human beings as the people that were brought forwards as those with lived experience. And for me, as a GP who does sit in a professional space and have to hold a certain amount of professionalism in that space, it's actually been extremely therapeutic to be able to allow myself to be more present. And I want to give gratitude to Lizzie, Nikki and Sinead for looking after us so well in what has been a very emotional process for all of us. It's been such a privilege, and you've heard why, I think, without me reiterating that. We've certainly laughed a lot as well, and it's made me realise that there's real sort of uplifting moments even when you're talking about some of life's most difficult things. And I want to say thank you to Tom particularly, because we were partnered together and we had some really genuinely just lovely human times and a real connection together. It has been uncomfortable, it's been really painful. We've all had to face up to some of the trauma that we've experienced both in our professional lives and in our existences, but we haven't been alone, and that has been really, really important. And I hope we will continue to be together and hopefully not online forever. I love what Nadine said in her film. I love that she said that her voice is as valid as a doctor's, but Nadine, your voice is more valid than mine, and my job is to carry your voice with me, because there is a Hippocratic oath that doctors make, and that is about doing no harm. And so I commit fully to seeing the harm that poverty does to people, and have over many years now, and will continue to take this forward. And I hope that many of you who have joined us, and I assume you've joined us because you care, will hear the harm that can occur and work with us to try and strive to make sure that this doesn't continue ad infinitum. I'd just like to say a few thank yous. Bev mentioned Sue Murphy at the beginning of the film, and I was very grateful to embark on this project with Sue, and it was thanks to Sue, it was thanks to Ian Williamson and my board at Manchester Health and Care Commissioning that we were able to start this Poverty Truth Commission, and I hope there's some more work to come that we again commit to supporting. I do want to just reiterate our thanks as commissioners to Lizzie, Nikki and Sinead and other people I think that have supported us along the way. It will have had an impact on you, and yet you held us in a space that made it possible to do the work that we've done. And I want to thank all of you, all of our commissioners. I've learned something different from each and every one of you, and I think that we'd be unanimous in that. So finally, to you, our audience, I think you're here because you care. I hope we've reignited your passion for your work. I hope we've given you some ideas and some thoughts about what you might take away from this. And I hope that we can ask you to commit with us that we will take this forwards. This wasn't a process that we did for the sake of it. It's a process we've all put ourselves through because we need to move forwards and make a difference. So I hope that when you leave us, that you'll stop and you'll take some time to think. You'll think about the importance of taking time to build relationships. You'll listen and you'll hear. And one of the things that Sinead used a lot with us in those early sessions was that we should use the words that we have. I'm actually going to use Nadine's words now, and I'm going to say, please, as you leave us today, can you bring the humanity back into the room? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Amazing. Well, we hope that you have enjoyed spending the last hour or so with us. All I have now left is to say some thank yous as well. We would like to thank the startup group, because without you, this commission wouldn't have happened. Thank you for your energy, your wisdom, advice, encouragement in getting the commission off the ground. Thank you to Church Action on Poverty, and particularly Neil Cooper, who was always the man behind the scenes, making sure we didn't spend too much money, and always being a voice of wisdom when we have needed it. A huge thank you to the funders. It goes without saying that without your financial support, this could not have happened. So a massive shout out to Manchester City Council, Manchester Healthcare and Commissioning, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation and Seedbed, and to our supporters, MAC and Cheetham Hill Advice Centre. And finally, we are so grateful to all the commissioners who entered into this process with their whole selves. It has taken bravery and honesty, vulnerability, and some really challenging moments. We sincerely thank every single one of you. Over the last couple of years, we have faced challenges that we had never imagined, but we have seen a city work so hard, work so creatively, and come up with alternative ways of working in order to care for the most vulnerable amongst us. Let's not stop there. We each have a responsibility to care for our neighbour, to look out for those who are struggling. Let's be brave enough to keep listening and keep evaluating our services and systems in order to treat every person with the equality and dignity that they deserve. Let's never be afraid of change when it means we can do something better. Nothing about us without us is for us.